This week we're joined by Tim and Ben. Tim is also the author of this week's subject. Would you like to introduce yourself, Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim Robinson, and I want to say, first of all, I am way more pragmatic than the hat I'm going to be wearing for this topic as a conversation, but I thought it was really interesting. So today we're going to talk about, does scaled agile cease to be agile? And it's a topic I think has been knocking around in these groups for quite some time. So maybe we can put a final nail in the coffin.
And Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Golob. I'm a delivery consultant. I'm happy to participate in this very interesting conversation.
And then and I have myself from Agilicist. So do you want to kick us off then, Tim? I guess with your opening controversial statement.
Well, I think the challenging thing about our community right now, I think, is that anything could be a controversial statement from anywhere. But I think one of the things that I would say is that the question is, does scaled agile cease to be agile? And I think as we were preparing for this, and I was thinking about this, we probably need to answer some questions there about what do we mean by agile in this context. So the question I'd really kind of prepared was we're all experienced working with agile teams. I wanted us to very quickly talk about what are the characteristics of agile teams that we see that means that they're successful. Is that a good opening point, do you think? So if we can define what agile means for teams, and then by extension, we could maybe try and work out what agile means for organizations. And then we can say, well, does it cease to be agile when we add scaling tools on top of that?
It's something we hear a lot. Scaled agile or safe or Scrum at scale, they're not agile, and often we hear it from folk that don't truly understand those. They've repeating buzzwords or statements that they've heard others come out with. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it might be worth delving into the background for those first, and then we can discuss it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said at the top of this, I am wearing my provocation hat in this session, but I am way more pragmatic than this in real life.
Go for it.
Cool. So the question I'd ask from you folks is, what are the characteristics of agile teams that are successful? What do you see is the makeup of a successful agile team? What do they have?
So I'm going to try and avoid trying to go through what the Agile Manifesto is, right? And say, well, an agile team, they care about people more than process. I don't want to do that. But for me, if you take it kind of to the core of what agility, or I think agility means, and why we do it, it's the agile team will do the right thing by the organization or by the value stream that they're working in at that right time. So irrelevant to what they've thought was the right thing up until then, what is the right thing for that team to do for the organization they're working in at that time?
Cool. Yeah, that's good. Anyone got a build on that?
Effective product-led delivery, building on customer feedback, rapid customer feedback.
I love this. When every time you say something, you have to add another word in: rapid customer feedback, which drives
but
executive customer feedback.
Because I'm a big I have a lot of history in waterfall projects and all sorts of stuff back in the day, and the key thing that's different and makes this more effective is the fact that people are adjusting and using their brains throughout, rather than just we'll spend months or years on specs, then we'll spend months and years on dev work, and then we'll deliver something that vaguely we wanted or is fit for purpose now as the world has moved on. And that's ultimately what Agile seems to fix for me.
So are we saying then, so whether it's from customer feedback or from a skills change or from stakeholder changing their minds because they understand the market better, that what a good Agile team will do is adapt to do the right thing by their organization at this time? It's about being adaptable, right? And the clues are getting the name.
Ben, have you got any builds on those things? I think characteristics. What characteristics?
The adaptability thing is a big one. I think it's being conscious of being able to change in direction fairly rapidly, and that could be driven by the business, by customer feedback, all sorts. I think it is having that ability to not to keep going in the same direction all the time, and being able to react effectively and continue to evolve as well.
Cool. No, I think that's great. And there's some great answers there. Now, this is not a prepared answer, but it is something I've thought about for a while. So I think some of the key words will probably be in the wrong order, but I would say for me, agile teams are appropriately sized teams who take feedback from customers and stakeholders to iterate on a delivery of a product or service that provides value for the business they work in. Generally, they do this by being a cross-functional team of individuals with a clear common goal. Yeah. So they have all of the skills necessary to achieve.
Did you just say it wasn't prepared? That sounded really. That sounded awful. Well done if it wasn't.
If you ask me to repeat it, you'll get a different set of words in a different order. So, but for me, one of the key attributes of an agile team is that it is cross-functional in nature. It has all of the skills necessary to deliver value for our customers or stakeholders. As we then, if that's important to us, and if we look at maybe a lens like Invest, right, which I get a lot of value from Invest when I'm talking about backlog creation and curation with a team. For me, that independent layer in Invest, and for anybody who's listening who doesn't know it, I know you guys do, independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small and testable work, or sized appropriately, however you want to use that S, and but there are variations on a theme. But the independent, the work we do, we can deliver as a team is a fundamental tenet of an agile team for me. Would anybody disagree with that being a key tenet for an agile team?
No, I don't disagree with it being a key tenet. I think it's probably the key tenet, because what we want to do is be able to adapt and be reactive to whatever, right, stakeholder or customer, whatever it is. We want to be able to react, and we can't do that if we're doing huge chunks of work. The smaller the chunk, the better, because that gives us that, and obviously there's an overhead with them being tiny. But when we get to a, like you say, appropriately sized, that's the thing for me that gives us agility, to be able to work in those small chunks. And whether you call them stories or backlog items or tasks or whatever, who cares? It's, can we work in small enough chunks that we can be adaptable when necessary?
Cool. So we're all agreed then on this call that agile teams have all of the skills necessary to deliver value to a customer or client. Yeah.
Yes. Whether they're able to truly represent the organizational direction, that's a different thing. That would be based on their opinion of the organizational direction.
Yeah. So who makes those decisions then, Simon? So in agile teams now, I mean, let's use Scrum as a model. It's the most popular delivery model out there. There are many others, and it may not be the best thing for you. You may have had challenges with it in the past, but it's something that most people understand. So in Scrum, who's got that accountability?
So the challenge is here, people have different interpretations of who should be doing what. And then it also kind of depends on the scale of the thing that you're building. So if you're building something small, or you're responsible for example, the website, you've been given sort of powers or authorization to take decisions on the direction of where that's going within a remit. And that's perfectly manageable and nice and easy. When you're trying to do something big that might be at the heart of an organization, it could be a large software platform that requires multiple teams to do. How do those multiple teams coordinate and have some form of adherence to the organizational strategic goals?
Okay, but before we go there, Simon, and I think it is a very important point, and it's definitely where I want us to head towards. Before we get to that, how do we deal with scale problems? Can we just talk about at that kind of atomic team level? That perfect sweet spot. We've got a team of people with all the skills necessary to deliver customer or consumer facing value. That's what we've said was agile. That's what we've described as an agile team. Who's making the decision on what we chase?
So if you go back to I know some people won't like it, but when Agile was around before Scrum was around, if that time is possible, then one of the, and I said I wouldn't, but I will, one of the Agile principles is that the business and technology teams must talk together daily. When we say the business, that's so we can understand, as a technology team, so we can understand what the customer wants. And now we have product owners and product managers, right? So we have a product owner in the team, and whatever framework you use, they've always got something like a product owner who is our kind of conduit to that customer. So in lieu of everyone on the team talking to all of the customers, which obviously will be chaotic, we have that kind of path now, don't we? We have a path that is so we don't have to speak to that, we as the team don't have to speak to the customer, the business every day, because we've got a product owner that we can speak to every day, and that product owner represents the customer. So for me, if you are talking Scrum, then you've got that role, you've got that person, as long as they're we've had this kind of conversation on other kickabouts, that only really works when they're good. Like it's not you don't just put the role in there and Bob's your uncle. It works. You've got to have a good solid product owner to be able to fulfill that.
I've seen in my career, 20 years of pretty much doing this, I've seen a handful of great product owners. It's such a difficult skill set, and it's very rarely manifest. And I think it's under supported as a skill, right?
I suspect that's a topic all in its own right.
Absolutely.
I mean, the reality is the best ones actually come from that industry and deeply understand it. So what differentiates them from BAs or sort of, just people that are coming up with, is they can genuinely make decisions because they know the direction that the product needs to go in based on their relationship with the customer or the organization or just the industry as a whole. They haven't just been put in that spot and can magically know, where BAs will have to go and ask. Product owners know because it's part of their strategy.
There's a spoiler for the next session then, Simon. Coming up next week on. So okay, we're switching back to then this, right? We're talking about those kind of small teams where we've got someone who is the voice of the customer. Now, quite often we talk about that as a product owner. They're the voice of the customer. They help the team to understand where the value lives and to prioritize the right things to build, to get feedback, to be that conduit for that feedback to be two-way, and to use that feedback to iterate and build better products and services as we go forward, right? So we've got that kind of responsibility or accountability in our teams. And as Simon was saying about scaling, right, when we've got challenges, when we start to get to a point where our structure, and I use that word carefully, our structure of the organization is driving a requirement for teams to work together to achieve a broader or bigger picture delivery. And I would argue that's a choice. It's not written down in stone that you have to work that way. But so where we need to work together across multiple teams, what we then do is we create another layer of orchestration and planning. We take away the voice of that representative of the customer, and they are an order taker for an orchestration and planning layer in our organization. Now I'm going to cough my guts up, so discuss.
So good. I guess a good background example is Abbas and I were on a merger some years back, and there was about 20 teams we inherited. We turned up, and the teams all worked in agile ways. They all did it very differently and spent an inordinate amount of time arguing with each other as to who knew agile best. But the thing they all had in common is the teams all had in common is they would regularly declare they were green, and yet the program was bright red. And we had a PMO running between each of the teams saying what has changed today to try and fix it for them. We were playing mummy and daddy. We were an orchestration layer that surely didn't need to exist, but did. And it was far more cumbersome than any waterfall program I've ever been on. So the way that we fixed it was to try and drive program level empathy. The teams were excellent at being cross-functional and caring about what the team were doing. They didn't really care about the other teams. So what we tried to instill in them was program level empathy. the thing we chose at the time was safe, but it could have been anything. The key there was to actually stop them caring about just their team and care about the collective.
It's worth pointing out as well, Simon, that we called out Scrum as a mechanism, which is our most popular at a team level. So it's a good benchmark to talk about. We'll probably do the same when we talk about scaling with SAFe. It doesn't mean that necessarily that if we're pointing holes or poking holes in scaled frameworks and methodologies, that we're poking holes in SAFe, LeSS, DAD, whatever else, right? Scrum and Scale. Yeah.
They approach it in subtly different ways. They're trying to fix the same problem, which is how do you do that? How do you do orchestration when? And I noticed you said choice. I wanted to delve into that, but we probably don't have the time.
Well, it is a choice. Yeah, it may be the appropriate choice because the cost of fixing dependencies between teams is too high. That's fine. But you probably should say we've made that choice explicitly, yeah. Because what I tend to find is we talk to product owners in using SAFe as an example. We talk to our product owners and we teach them, you're a product owner. Your job is to maximize the value of your product within this value stream. Great. Now go to the PI planning event. We're going to tell you what you need to build, or you're going to work on what you need to build across this as part of a wider thing. You're not actually as empowered as we tell you are in your product owner training. Now, I've not done SAFe product owner training. Maybe that's really well described, but I do see a gaslighting of product owners in that space.
It isn't quite like that. But there is a weakness there. So ultimately, products as a collective are coming up with, based on all the stuff that's passed down from the organization vision or strategy. Now we're going to turn that. We've got our epics, which are our sort of, our the goals that we're trying to achieve, and then we've got our features for how we're going to achieve those goals, and then the teams then have a look at those features and break them down. And it is really how the organizations have implemented SAFe. If you follow it to the letter of the sort of law, the product owners are a little disenfranchised. So we don't tend to implement it like that. We try and have the product owners. So you've got a product manager who is devolving responsibilities to the teams. And in SAFe, it is the product manager comes up with the features and the product owner can support them. And then the product owner is representing those features on the team when they break it down into stories. We like to have the product owners a lot more invested in that pipeline of work. But I think, if we were to look at Scrum at Scale, it is the product owner's ownership is definitely weaker.
Yeah, but I think that's probably true in any scaling. That's, I guess, my argument, right? That is true at any scaling framework that I'm aware of. Now, I'm not aware of all of them, and I'm not an expert in any of them. So that, from my position, I'm very easily could be wrong. So strongly held opinion held very, very weakly. So tell me I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong. I will change my opinion.
I'll go with a little bit left side on this, because you could have the same argument, and people do, right? A little rant here. So people do argue, and it's all over, at least LinkedIn, right? That SAFe isn't agile because you do a 3-month plan and that's a very waterfall, and everyone has to come together to make this plan, and you can't change it, etc. But I don't think that's not agile. That might be making a plan that has objectives that you can adapt and you can change. But we also need to kind of think about the principles behind SAFe. So some of the principles behind SAFe aren't about the process. So one of them is decentralized decision making, right? So all decisions, or apart from the 3 key ones, but most decisions should be made at the team level by the teams, the people on the ground doing the work. And the other one is organize yourselves around value, right? So don't worry about the organization's hierarchy, because that's an HR thing. Organize yourselves around what is the right thing to do for value for your value stream. And that's how you should organize. So if you need to change the way that product owners and product managers sit in order to give them more decision-making powers, then do that. And SAFe says do that. What people do, though, in SAFe is they think of it as a process and follow the process. And you can argue the exact same thing at Scrum, right? So if you just follow the process in Scrum, it doesn't work for everyone. But if you do Scrum, and as Tim, you said, you're a lot more pragmatic than your current hat. If you do Scrum in a pragmatic way, it can work really, really well. And if you do Safe in a pragmatic way, it can work really well. And it completely is agile if you don't follow it by the T and think it is just a process. It's not a process. It's still it's a framework and a mindset.
It's the understanding. Like, so, a quick run through. Product managers come up with features. Product owners talk to the teams maybe before. Then in the planning session, there is no plan. The teams break down those things into stories and then start working out what the next 3 months is like. And key to that, they understand. So even Scrum at Scale does this now. They have the dependency where they actually understand what each other's dependencies are. And for me, that's the key bit. That the teams now know if they change something, who is impacted. Then they can go and have a conversation. Because the reality is the most important thing about that planning session is that they've done planning together. It's not that plan. And I think probably that's where some people either sort of, misunderstand it. And these are practitioners of Safe as well that misunderstand it, where they go ahead and write, that's our plan. We didn't do that plan. Why didn't we do that plan? That was our plan. No. What it does do, even though the product owners are now ring fenced into, I can make decisions about my team's level stuff. And if I need to make a decision that impacts more people, I need to involve others. I need to escalate. So there's now a hierarchy. That is a useful thing for decision making, because all of a sudden they can talk to a product owner on another team and they can go, look, we're going to have to make some changes in priority here. We've already discussed it. Here are some options to the product manager. Product manager can go, yes. Actually, that impacts another train. So it sounds like a heavyweight thing, but actually having an obvious flow of who I need to go to stops what we've seen. Some organizations, we've got multiple customers where we go in and we see this a lot, where a team is having to fend off multiple stakeholders or all demanding that this is a priority. And the team are having to fight them off because there's no mechanism to do it. And we see when product owners there's no form of hierarchy or whatever, the teams start becoming little selfish silos. And then the teams are having a front off to the world rather than people being able to sort of, an easy mechanism as to, this affects more than us, we ask that person. So yes, there are some rules and structure. I think those rules and structure help the teams focus on the job.
So I definitely don't want to bash on, I know we're talking about Safe at the moment, and Safe in particular, I don't want to bash on that because I don't think, I don't think any of those scaling things are inherently bad or evil. They're tools that we can bring to bear. I didn't hear what you said.
Like Simon suggested, for some crazy moment that he actually went off topic, which is insane for him to do that.
No. But I would say that there are sets of tools that help to solve specific problems that organisations face, and there are worse ways of dealing with it. But I think you raised an interesting point. I'd ask, those dependencies that exist between teams, are they beneficial, or are they at least potentially detrimental to the delivery of value?
It's kind of what you were talking about when you did your not rehearsed what is an agile team, cross-functional and you didn't use these words exactly, but that single path to production, right? So T-shape, where one team can take all the work that's necessary, all the work that needs to be done, do it, definition of done, do the work, and its value at the end of their iteration. If you have many teams all working on the same area in the organization, value stream, whatever, then you're inevitably going to have teams that are dependent on one another. So as you scale up, those teams that were independent paths to production now aren't independent paths to production, because you've got many teams working on the same thing. There is going to be some dependencies between them. The trick is, how do we make those dependencies not destructive? How do we make those dependencies still fluid and still workable? And both of the two big scaling, Scrum at Scale and Safe, have a dependency map to do that. Scrum at Scale say, try to kill the dependencies, and do that with making fast decisions. And their idea of doing Scrum of Scrums and Scrum of Scrum and Scrums ad infinitum is we fix these issues that come up quickly, right? Decision latency is the thing that kills projects. And so let's not have that. Let's fix those issues now. Whereas in SAFe, they've got the SOS on the ArtSync every a few times a week, a few times a sprint is, I think, the formal way of doing it, but every few days. And they have all the right people there to do that. But they don't say get rid of the dependencies. They say manage the dependencies, because there will always be dependencies. But the idea of Scrum at Scale is let's change the organization so that we don't have dependencies. And SAFe is like, we're in a good place. Let's just manage the dependencies. So they're slightly different. Both want to get single party production out there.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a really good summary.
Those dependencies, so ultimately we try and get rid of as many as possible. We've been places where it's like a spaghetti mess up on a board. You're like, okay, we need to get some cross-functional, we need to reduce the sort of, we've got a front-end team and a back-end team. And you can make it great inroads into making that all more effective. Sometimes you just realize that it's unavoidable. Maybe there's not enough justification to have a React person on every team, and actually maybe just a couple that are an accepted bottleneck. Maybe that's the way to go. The one where we normally discover you can't get around those interdependencies are specialist teams. So where the big one for us is one of our customers, there are back-end developers with levels of maths that's not easy to recruit for. And those mathematical geniuses, there's no way they can spread those across the teams or hire them. These are beloved employees that there's a very small number of them. And therefore, there's always going to be a specialist team for those. We tried and failed to distribute them. So sometimes when there's a specialist team, or there's maybe a technology stack that is tiny but important, a specialist team. So I don't think we can fully ever get rid of interdependencies. Minimize them as much as we can.
So I think there are many other tool sets which would help us to understand what to do about those critical chain dependencies and bottlenecks, and which they tend to be, right? So if you've got a limited subset or pool of people with the skills necessary to facilitate the delivery of value, often they're a bottleneck in our delivery, right? Because I need Brent. Yeah, I haven't chosen that name at random. I need Brent to get this done, right? So there's a bottleneck. There are ways of dealing with that which are not to put them into a dedicated team, right? And we don't need to dive into that in this call, because I think that's another topic of conversation. But it kind of brings me back to, I think sometimes we're making these decisions to leave the structure and shape the way it is, implicitly, not explicitly. And I think if we should be more thinking about it, it would be useful. One of the ways that might help, I think I talked to someone about this today, was the idea of your PI board. Every piece of red string, let's measure that, right? PI on PI. How many dependencies did I have last increment? How many do I have this increment? What types are they? Am I getting better or worse? What can I do to improve by reducing the number of dependencies?
You must do that cleverly or smartly, because if you just say reduce the number of dependencies, that might not be the economical thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. So, like as Simon says, putting a mathematician on every team, I got rid of all my dependencies, but it's cost me an extra £500,000 a year. So you got to do that. You got to do that in a smart way. And how much do these dependencies cost me, either in terms of time or money or whatever it might be? And that's what we need to do. Yeah.
That transaction cost, for example, we've had a team in the Philippines where the internet connection was absolutely awful, and actually the most effective thing was to batch things up to them. Not the best for flow, but otherwise it started becoming an absolute nightmare to try and sort of trickle feed them. It ended up taking 3 times as long. So that transaction cost became quite important.
What I'm finding interesting now, I keep trying to go back to that question, and it was, does scaling agile cease to be agile? And do you know what?
There's definitely a perception that it is.
Oh, there's definitely a perception, but I don't know if it's from ceasing to be agile or whatever the not opposite is, because a lot of organizations that go, oh, we're not agile, but we need to scale up. Let's put in Scrum at Scale, let's put in SAFe, and it doesn't work. So I don't think they're ceasing to be agile. They weren't agile in the first place. They weren't agile in the first place, and now they've got something to blame, right? So trying to build on a fundamental fund. What's that word?
Yeah, no, I think that's
Foundation.
right.
We're trying to build on a foundation of non-agility, and then you put on a framework. What SAFe does give you is you can go for a bit longer because there are structures in place. You can go for a bit longer pretending you're agile in SAFe when you're not, because you weren't in the first place. Scrum at Scale, you can't do it, right? Scrum at Scale, you've actually got to be agile and be good. Do good Scrum, and then you can scale it up, and it scales up beautifully when you're doing good Scrum. SAFe, you can kind of get away with it and be, as Jeff Sutherland likes to call it, Scrum BS, and still kind of scale up with SAFe, and it will just be scaled BS in that case. So I don't know if it ceases to be agile, but it's definitely, I don't know what the word is I'm trying to think of, but not the opposite of not.
It's a big one with the banks, isn't it? Because they already have these formal processes, and they see the SAFe diagram, and it's like, oh, that's massive and complicated, and let's have a little bit of that. And their fundamental problem is they couldn't have done any of that. They should have learned some decent agile behaviours. And it's the big thing I see, especially with the old sort of banking organisations who have a tradition where the business have a wall between them and technology. That's techie and delivery. And when you look at all the POs on those delivery teams, they're all XBAs or techies. None of them are truly representing the business. So they haven't actually become agile at all. They've just called themselves agile.
Okay, and I think I agree. So I would say then, based on that scaling agile, does scaled agile cease to be agile? I don't think that's true. I think scaled agile can still be agile, but quite often the adoption of scaled agile, and I'm going to do that in air quotes, because it's the adoption of a framework, methodology, or process is hiding the fact that you didn't have that agility in the first place. So what you've done is you've scaled chaos and got more chaos. Who'd have thought it? So I started out with saying, I was going to be a bit kind of, I'm more pragmatic in real life than I would have started in this call. But the point is that I had a hypothesis that actually scaling tools stop agile from working at scale. And I think, having had this conversation, I don't think that's true.
There is a trap though. There's a trap with SAFe. That because there are so many rules or so many things written down, that it's easy for painting by numbers to happen. And so I personally believe that Scrum at Scale is better, is more agile, and allows more mature teams to behave in a truly scalable way throughout the organisation. But the problem is, I think probably a lot of organisations that are on their first steps, you wouldn't be able to get there straight away. They might need stepping stones. So maybe SAFe or maybe other things are stepping stones to get to true agility.
Question, Simon. So there's a clue in the title, SAFe being a framework, right? Now, because they want to help organisations to adopt good practices, they've got a very large body of knowledge. What I tend to see is that's not seen as a framework, and it's quite often by practitioners not described as a framework. It's described as a process, a set of practices thou shalt follow, right? You wouldn't believe the nightmare I had trying to organize a value stream where some of my teams wanted to use Kanban, Well, how do we do estimation across the value stream? How do we get a standardization on velocity for a value stream when we've got some teams who want to work in Scrum XP, some teams who want to follow Kanban? You can't do it. The SAFe says you can't do it.
I disagree, Tim.
No, I disagree as well. And that's my point, though, that some of the practitioners that I was working with did not. Thou shalt follow the guides, the SAFe guide.
That's the danger, though, isn't it? So the whole word framework. So I mean, the reality is, all SAFe has done is nicked a load of stuff from other people that seems to work. They've bolted it all together and they've called it a framework. if you didn't say you were adhering to a framework.
Safe in a nutshell there from Simon. I like it.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine I'll get some letters from that. There'll be litigation. But the reality is, maybe if you didn't call it a framework, maybe you said that this is that, X company name here, this is our way, then it forces people just to think a little bit more about the things that they're doing, rather than doing it because it was written down or they took a magical exam that made them do it.
I think both sides of that argument are really quite strong things, right? So having less guidance forces you to think for yourself, which is great if you've got enough core understanding to do that. Why we're back now to the world of, you need to be a little bit agile to be able to scale that agile up. This is where Scrum at Scale sits. Not a massive amount of guidance. Yeah, do a Scrum of Scrums. What's that? Well, I don't know, work it out for yourself. Here's some basic guidance. And then on the other side of the fence, we've got SAFe, and it says, do PI planning. What's that? Here are 5 pages, 10 pages, guidance, links out to subject matter experts on how to do effective PI planning, blah, 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 blah. Process, which is driving a behavior of, well, if I follow the rules, I will be successful. So it's like, think for yourself, follow someone else's thinking. And I think that's the challenge we see across those two models.
If we change that SAFe process to advice, then it becomes quite useful. And actually, we've seen PI plannings work remarkably well, but I still hear people saying PI, obviously not from our clients, people saying people saying, I fundamentally disagree that PI planning is a useful tool. You can do it all without PI planning because of the way that we scale. And they've probably gone through a forced process of how PI planning works, and it doesn't work if you force it in the wrong way. If it brings people together, and those people that have now come together work better because of it, and they've got a better relationship with their peers, with their other teams, with their stakeholders, with their leaders, with their customers, because they've all come together and had a big old session, whether it be a planning session or a celebration session afterwards or whatever it might be. That can only be beneficial and positive, can't it? Even if, as Simon says at the beginning, even if that plan changes, and we're not going to follow that plan, we're going to do something different. Oh, agile. We're going to be agile and do something slightly different because we're agile. We've still all come together. We know each other intimately, so we can be more agile together. If you don't do that planning and we don't know each other intimately, then making those changes is actually harder, because you've got to do those kind of documentation, write things down, red tape type of change requests. I still see people in Agile using change request document. Mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing.
That event is tremendously useful for people getting to know each other. And as an old waterfall program manager, knowing that all the teams are just going to fix it before it comes to me, amazing.
I think what we're saying then is events like PI planning, big room planning type events, serve as a building a glue for teams to understand each other better, to aid their communication, to work together to meet a common goal. It's also a massive risk mitigation step in our business delivering its value, right? It's not about the outcome being a great plan, right? We can come out of that with a Gantt chart, but anybody who's ever seen a Gantt chart and lived with one knows it is wrong now. We'll change it. I know it's wrong again now. So we know that that's not the reason they exist. The reason they exist is to set our target, our North Star, not to give us a list of things to do, right? They're about risk mitigation. They're about common understanding. There needs to be maybe something around planning the same way as card conversation confirmation would be for a user story, right? The planning exists for that same sort of thing, right? Basic core understanding, confirmation of understanding, and the conversation that supports that. That's why we do the planning. What do you get out of that? You might get some artifacts, but they'll be wrong, so don't worry about them. worry about the other stuff.
So exactly right. What you want is a lightweight way of managing that heavy plan, so that it can change. And tools like Big Agile are absolutely perfect for running your organization at scale. You've got to have some type of way of documenting what it is that you want to deliver. And those tools, actually, new tools on the market today that aren't Gantt charts, are excellent. I guess it's probably time that we start to wrap this up. Did we come to a conclusion? I've got one in my head, but if anyone's got a better one, Ben, eager.
No. I've been listening to everything everybody's saying. I pretty much agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said. I mean, ultimately, again, centralized planning, and does it cease to be agile? Okay, I think just taking a quick step back is that as long as the teams remain agile and have that ability to be agile, the rest of it is there to support those teams being agile. That's the way I see it, in the sense that you have the mechanisms to unblock things, to have visibility for dependencies, to work out what the strategy is that we're working towards. So all that heavy lifting stuff is taken away and allows those teams still to be agile. That's, in my humble opinion, what it produces.
And I guess the danger. The danger is the organisation that adapts it and how process driven. So we've been somewhere with a heavy duty PMO process, and all that happened is they started making demands on the team to generate plans. We've also seen a project manager walking around a planning event going, yeah, you'll have to change that because that doesn't match the plan. You're like,
pragmatism as well. Throw that in there.
You need to be So Abbas, you would say something?
Well, I was going to say. So what we're saying is, so as long as this scaling up shenanigans doesn't stop the teams being agile and doesn't stop them getting on with the stuff that they're supposed to be getting on with for the benefit of your organization, then scaling agile doesn't cease to be agile. However, if you're not agile in the first place, scaling up is not going to make you agile.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's the conclusion that we've come to. So yeah, is that saying then if you're doing scaling and it's not working for you, then you probably weren't getting the fundamentals right to start with?
Yes, that's kind of what I was saying. Yeah.
We'll probably come and speak to people like you and get some help there.
One of the initial rules though is, don't scale. Don't scale unless you need to, and only scale if you have a problem. Not we're 10 teams, let's use scaled agile. Are you 10 teams with a problem? So, if you're not, don't do it.
Yeah, I'm really pleased we came to a conclusion there, because I thought at the beginning it could have gone either way, right? Because I think there was a risk that the answer would be the other way around. But I think it's great to hear that we're all kind of on the same page here and fundamentally in agreement. That's great.
We have a subject for next time then. Product owners. What's an effective product owner structure?
Yeah.
I'd love that one.
There was little argument though, wasn't there? It was we all agreed all the way through.
Yeah. So
yeah, nice argument. But never mind. We can do more of these and do more arguments, aren't you? We
know people that are deeply anti-safe or deeply pro. Fanboys, but from one side or the other, should maybe get some, maybe slightly people that aren't that pragmatic to come along.
I think we have to next time, because for me it's like saying I love hammers and I only ever use hammers to solve my problem. It's like, what? I don't think I want to bring my car to you, I'm afraid.